Lebu, let me first thank you for agreeing to be part of this discussion. It's a conversation around what we see happening in terms of our country and also in terms of our broader society. And in particular, the seemingly state of helplessness that we seem to be in as a society, and we seem to be a society that has resigned itself to a point where we say this is how life is going to be for us. And there's little or almost nothing that we are doing to actually try and rescue ourselves from the current situation or situations that we find ourselves. And again, this is something that has been prompted by the post that I saw that you posted on LinkedIn, where you said prayer will not help us. And I found that interesting. And I said, okay, maybe we need to have a conversation and maybe just pick your brain in terms of what is it that influenced you in terms of the post that you wrote, where you say prayer is not going to help us, and maybe just take us through as to what was going on through your mind at the time. What were the things that you were observing, and that perhaps were troubling you in terms of what you see happening in terms of the society, and therefore you felt that you needed to share with the broader community in terms of what is happening in our society.
I think our voices are being silenced in many different ways, and the advent of social media being one, that it's an environment where you can voice your opinion, but if you don't say what the masses want to hear, you can be cancelled, and unfortunately it can affect your livelihood, it can affect many things. So it has found its way in silencing voices. It's in silencing people who want to speak sense, who want to lead in a particular direction. If you don't say what people want to hear, it becomes a big problem. And being the son of a pastor, and me stating that prayer is not going to help us, I know that would annoy my dad in a big way.
Yeah.
But I've been very fortunate to travel across the African continent, and spend time in different communities through the work that I do. And I think you see it playing out. I've spent quite a bit of time in Zimbabwe. And what is happening here is what people said 10 years ago, 15 years ago, that we are going to end up like Zimbabwe. But when these things were being said back then, we didn't see it, because we're almost like in the last phase of the sweet spot, like the last remnants of summer or spring, and we didn't see what was coming next, and maybe we didn't want to see it, and I'm at a stage where I'm realizing that, oh snap, it's happening to us, and a lot of us actually care about our country. This is home. We want to fix things. But that state of helplessness is a desperate cry for help. That is there a possibility that we can start having conversations that matter? And can we do something? And can we put our differences aside and find a way to actually go beyond talk and actually implement certain solutions? I believe that a lot of us are trying in different spaces, but we've got too much of siloed approaches in what we are doing. And as a result, it affects, at a micro level, it seems like we're doing something. But whenever you lift your head and you look up, you're like, oh, Rome is burning. And it's burning way too fast. And you're like, what can we do? And you try and raise your voice in different spaces. You try and do something, you try and run initiatives. But you're realizing that it needs the greater collective. It needs our diverse pool of experiences, our rich backgrounds, and those voices coming together in a cohesive way and saying, hey, we've got to start acting. But I am not seeing that happening at a rapid pace that is required, especially looking at what is happening on the downside, the corruption that is taking place in our state, both in the private and public sector, and getting into these spaces, and these are people that we have to deal with every day. And then you start realizing that it's like the entire system is rotting. Where do you start? Where do you end? What do you do? Do you start thinking about getting out of the country and going to find a better place for yourself.
Yeah.
Is that even a solution for you? So that's kind of where I'm at in terms of the state of mind.
Yeah. I think one of the things that you've mentioned, that throughout the society we seem to have all these social ills and challenges that we have, from the economic side, in terms of our society, from the social side, in terms of our economy, education, I mean all spheres in terms of the society, we seem to be having challenges. And one of the things that personally I've seen, which also is very unfortunate in terms of our society, is the emergence, like you said earlier on, of misdirected cancel culture.
Yes.
Which people use when they believe that whatever narrative that you're trying to put across doesn't go with their preferred narrative. And therefore they look at cancelling you instead of listening as to where you're coming from. And then perhaps seeing as to whether perhaps there is value in terms of whatever that you're talking about and perhaps how we can engage. Now, I mean, I want to talk about the different spheres that we've already mentioned. But let's talk about, for instance, government, is corruption. As a person that grew up in the township, whenever, because I visit the township where I grew up in Gaisafong quite frequently, and I'm amazed at the fact that I'm now in my mid-50s. I'm amazed at the fact that I'm in my 50s, but the place where I grew up in the township hasn't changed. It has remained the same. There's no like upliftment of the society. The way that people lived when I was growing up, more than 50 years ago, is still the same way that they are actually living. And I'm looking at our society and then I'm saying, does this mean that our people in the townships are destined to have that life forever? Or is it because in terms of the people that we've entrusted to make a difference to such people have forgotten, in fact not even forgotten, no longer see that as their role or their duty to uplift those people? And I see a state of helplessness every street that I turn within the township. The people that I grew up with, I was fortunate because my parents were sort of able to take me out of the township and put me through boarding school to sort of shape my mind in terms of how I'm supposed to look at things and see things, and also including in terms of them being able to take me to university. But I look at my peers, people that I grew up with, the life that they live is the same life that was lived by their parents. Nothing has changed. And there are a number of things, and we will sort of talk about them through this discussion that I have seen. I've seen a situation wherein there's a state of helplessness. When you look at their faces, you look at their eyes, where they're almost saying to you, what can we do? This is the life that we're destined for. You know? And I am asking myself, where are the people that are supposed to make such people's lives better? What is it that they are focusing on than what they are supposed to be focusing on in terms of those people and those communities? And I am reminded of the fact that when I was growing up, you also had a lot of activists, political activists, community activists. What goes wrong when these activists get into positions of power? And sometimes I even ask myself, is it even reasonable for me to even think that they will continue to be activists even when they get to seats of power? Or they become the very thing that they were fighting against when they get to these places of power. Because they stop being activists. They become something else that further entrenches the state of helplessness that we find in terms of our communities and our society. So I would like us to go back and maybe just pick your brain in terms of how you see things in terms of political corruption. Where does it come from? Why is it endemic? Because I want us to talk about it in light of also what you were saying, that prayer is not going to help us. We need to do something. So where does this thing come from? Why are we having this endemic corruption in terms of our government, and also resulting in a state of helplessness where we seem to have resigned ourselves to a situation where we say, it is what it is?
Yeah. I think we make the big mistake of thinking that people do things for, I don't know, for the greater humanity, for the goodness of society.
Yeah.
Even churches.
Yeah.
I've often challenged my father's church. And it's often been a sore point because I don't deliver it in a sweet way.
Yeah.
And what I am picking up over and over, and I work in a lot of townships and rural areas.
Yeah.
That's just my life, right? You realize that people are hungry, for starters.
Yeah.
And if people are hungry and you give them bread, then you've quenched a particular part of their anger.
Yeah.
And when somebody gets comfortable, they start thinking about other things. It's easy for them to forget the core mission of why we, of the injustices, of the social injustices that exist around us.
Yeah.
And you often pick it up everywhere. There will often be a few champions within society, in townships, in rural areas, in urban spaces, that they will stand up and say, we're going to stand up against this thing and deal with it.
Yeah.
Everybody can be bought.
Yeah.
That is the unfortunate thing. We all have a price.
Scary.
Yeah. And I often have a controversial view that, society is ruled by whiteness, just for starters. And we haven't unpacked that. And in it being ruled by whiteness, it means everybody aspires to whiteness. So the moment they get to that level of whiteness that gives them the comfort that they're looking for, then you've quenched them. So
maybe explain that whiteness that you're referring to.
So white men rule our society in every sphere of life.
Yeah.
They decide. They are captains of industry. They decide what happens. They decide what politicians must do and what they mustn't do. And politicians work quite closely together with the private sector, because there's always individuals behind the scenes who are funding operations, who are funding whatever that must go on. Money does not come from thin air, right? So when certain interests are funded, you've got to meet that mandate accordingly. It does not matter what you tell the people. There's a lot of rhetoric that we hear, and we can see that people are lying, because when you challenge them, you start seeing the cracks in whatever's happening in that system. So when those few champions of society decide that they're going to stand up against something, all you need to do is wave a bag in front of them.
Yeah.
And that's when you can truly test the character of an individual. And that's where we must also stop with hero worship. We find somebody, we say, this one looks like they're going to be our savior. Mistake number one. Because then we outsource our thinking. We stop taking ownership of our own challenges. We start taking ownership of our environment, because if we took ownership, we would protect the spaces that we are in. Unfortunately, we see it in other races, and it's not that it's not happening in black communities. It's just that it happens at a very micro level, at a granular level, and we are not united enough because we've got different challenges.
Yeah.
Within the Afrikaans community, they've got one core mission. They're saying we are going extinct. So because they believe that so much, that they're going extinct, they have something to believe in, they have something that they can rally themselves
around. That brings them together. It brings them together,
regardless of their social standing and the different social classes that they're in.
Yeah.
They have an understanding. And I mean, when you look at an organization like AfriForum, that organization's got about 500,000 odd members in there that are paying like 50 rands a month.
Yeah.
There's about maybe 4 million or 5 million Afrikaners. I don't know the actual stat, but it's a smaller group of Afrikaners that have come together, and they're making a massive change for the Afrikaans culture. And they are challenging every sector of society using their money collectively, because there's a clear big vision of where they are going and why they're doing what they're doing. And I think we need to take a step back, and if we just look back into the 90s and even into the early 2000s, there was some sort of mission that we all had, but we forgot along the way because the black middle class started rising. And the unfortunate thing with the rise of the black middle class, people getting into corporate organizations and people and the quality of their life improving, is that you stop looking at the problems. The problems start annoying you. It's like what happens when you land in Cape Town. They start putting up walls from the airport all the way into the city so that you don't see the poverty instead of dealing with the poverty. It's the same thing that black people are doing when they get a bit of comfort. We stop looking back into the townships that we come from, the environments that we come, and saying, how can I, as an individual, take ownership of this process and make sure that there's an improvement? Because nobody else is coming to save us. Nobody's going to do this if I do not do it. So it starts with us. Like, we don't take that ownership first and foremost, and it then has a knock-on effect because everybody else is thinking about themselves. And when we are divided like that, it's easy to buy us. And buying a person does not mean that you have to give them money. Just make sure that you are meeting their area of need.
Make them comfortable.
Make them comfortable.
As soon as they become comfortable, they forget about everything else.
Yes, that's it. You know, and we are all guilty of it in different ways. But because some of us, the work that we do forces us to wake up every other day and be like, oh snap, I can't forget this because I have to go and deal with that reality every other day. So you end up finding yourself speaking about it. So I do not know even if for me, if it comes from an altruistic place or it comes from the fact that I'm affected by it through my own work that I do. And it's like, how do we make sure that we solve this? Because if we don't, what is coming? What is the future? What does the future of our kids look like?
Exactly.
You know, in a failed state, we can see it in other African countries. That's why we see a lot of our African brothers and sisters flocking into our country. It doesn't solve the problem. Instead, it messes up our own internal system because our resources are limited. But we must question ourselves, why are they flocking here? It's because in their own countries that they're in, it's a failed state. And we are heading towards that if we are not already there. And the question is, can we solve it or not?
But this brings me to this question. Maybe I'm asking you also as a wrong person because you're not a politician.
Yes.
Because you see, our brothers and sisters that come from our communities, and like I said earlier on, we believe in them when they are activists.
Yes.
And they are working in terms of, and they are vocal in terms of the betterment of our society and our communities. And we put so much trust in them that these are people that are going to fight for our rights and sort of make our lives better from where we come from in the townships. I know in terms of even this interview that we're doing it, we're not doing it within the township.
Yes.
But we know, we grew up in the township. We go to the township all the time. We still have people that we know and relatives in terms of the township. So we're talking about something that we know.
Yes.
But what is it that goes wrong? Because there is something in my mind that I'm trying to test. What goes wrong from a point where you were an activist? An activist that was vocal in terms of bettering people's lives, in terms of the society. And because of you being vocal, the community then says, that's the person that we can put in that position, or in the maybe in parliament or in local government. It doesn't matter as to what level in terms of government. That can continue and go there and be our voice, because not all of us can go into parliament and sit there. Not all of us can go to local government chambers and sit there. But this person can go on our behalf and speak on our behalf. But what goes wrong, because in almost all instances, these people that were activists, when they get into government or into these positions, they stop being activists. We don't see activism at all. But we see a situation wherein there's hunger for positions within the parties that they belong to. And in my recollection, when I look at all political parties, they are the same. There is no one political party that I would say, oh, that one is better than this one. No, they're all the same. But what is it that goes wrong when someone was an activist and suddenly is given this position to go and sit in those chambers or in parliament on behalf of the people that he was elected or that he's supposed to represent? What goes wrong in terms of them forgetting to continue to be an activist? What is it that goes wrong?
It's us and our hero worship. We've got to stop it. And on top of stopping hero worship, we've got to think about our systems of accountability. They're pretty weak. The way that we choose people and make them our leaders to go and represent us in particular spaces, how are we holding them accountable? Our systems of governance to make sure that they can account to us, the people, they're very weak.
Right there, right there before you continue. That's one of the things that worries me.
Yeah.
That at the time that these people are activists,
Yeah.
they are accountable to the people.
Yes.
And that when then they get into these positions, they no longer are accountable to the people.
Yeah.
They become accountable to the political party that
Yes.
they belong to, or maybe the masters that they serve.
Yeah.
I think that's where, for instance, I have a problem that this person was an activist
Yeah.
and was accountable to us as the people.
Yeah.
What is it that makes this person now no longer be accountable to the person, but be accountable to the political party? And this is why I'm saying that all political parties are
Yes.
actually the same. We have, personally, I think that people think that constitutional democracy is the best type of government that we can have. Personally, I feel that that's nonsense.
Yeah.
All forms of democracies or government have got their weaknesses. And ours, in terms of constitutional democracy, already we've seen the flaws, serious flaws for that matter.
Yeah.
So the hero worshipping that you're talking about right now, how do we turn around and make sure that we become aware that this person that is vocal while he is amongst us or while she is amongst us, let's not worship this person.
Yeah.
Because this is a human being.
Yeah.
When he gets to the seat of power, this person is going to be comfortable and no longer become accountable to us.
Yes.
And become accountable to the political party that he or she belongs to.
Yeah.
Or maybe to other bosses that are actually maybe funding him or her in terms of the corruption that we're speaking about.